I'm just somebody that doesn't like being lied to. It does feel like this was the plan all along. Why didn't you just say that up front?
What they found inside Camilla's holiday villa left the royal family speechless. Every year, Camilla requested her holiday at the same time, retreating to her secluded villa while the world watched in quiet curiosity. "It is my time to be alone," she would say, a gentle smile hiding secrets no one could guess. But this year, the villa became more than a private escape. It became a place of shock and disbelief. When King Charles and Prince William entered, they were unprepared for what awaited them. Walls covered in photos, scribbles of hate, and reminders of a life long gone left them speechless. This cannot be real," Charles whispered. Camilla's annual holiday routine. Every year, without fail, Camilla asked for the same week off. Not randomly, not when it suited others, but always at the same time. "I need this time," she would tell her aides quietly, her voice calm but firm. "It is mine, and I will not be disturbed." The palace staff learned long ago not to question her. The calendar was cleared, flights arranged, security notified, and her private villa prepared for her arrival. Nothing could change her mind. But Camilla never took these holidays with Charles, nor with William or Harry. She went alone, leaving the family behind. "She prefers solitude," one aide explained to a curious reporter once. "It is her way of resting. She wants no interruptions." Her absence was always noticed, but no one could say exactly why she chose to be alone. The villa became a private world, guarded and untouchable, a place that belonged only to her. The public was fascinated. Newspapers and magazines speculated endlessly. Headlines asked questions like, "What does Camilla do in her secret villa?" and "Queen consort or hidden recluse?" Every small detail was examined. Reporters noted when she arrived, what she wore, and even which books she carried. Yet no one knew what truly happened inside. "It is always a mystery," one royal commentator said on television. "We see her come and go, but the inside remains hidden, untouched by gossip and public eyes alike." The villa itself added to the intrigue. Staff members spoke of unusual rules, though they did so carefully. "No visitors ever," one long-serving maid whispered. "Nothing leaves the villa. Sometimes we are told not to even speak about our work here." Security was tighter than in any other royal property. Guards patrolled day and night. Cameras monitored every corner, and instructions were strict, almost secretive. "We were not allowed to share anything, even with our closest colleagues," recalled a chef who had served there. It felt like the villa had its own rules, separate from the palace. Inside, the villa was luxurious but quiet. Polished floors reflected sunlight streaming through large windows. Curtains were always drawn just right, carpets perfectly placed, and flowers arranged with precise care. Yet despite the beauty, a strange stillness lingered. "It feels different from anywhere else in the royal estates," one aide said. "It is calm, yes, but also tense, almost like the walls are holding a secret." Even staff who had worked there for years admitted they never truly understood what Camilla did in her private time. Camilla herself seemed to enjoy the solitude. When she arrived, she would often walk through the gardens alone, reading quietly under the sun, or sit by the fireplace with a book in her hands. "This is my time," she would tell no one in particular, as if speaking to herself. "No one else matters here." Family and palace officials respected this, though they could not help but wonder, why did she insist on going alone? What made this villa so special that she would never share it with anyone, even Charles? The curiosity of the public, combined with the secrecy of her staff, turned the villa into a legend of its own. It became a symbol of Camilla herself, private, carefully controlled, and full of questions that no one dared to answer. Reporters, historians, and royal watchers speculated endlessly, but nothing was ever confirmed. "It is as if the villa has its own life," a commentator once remarked, "and Camilla is the only one who knows its story." But what could have led the royal family to her holiday villa? Routine checkup on royal properties. It was a crisp morning when King Charles decided to conduct a routine inspection of all royal properties. The sun had just begun to rise, painting the palace grounds in soft gold, but Charles's mind was focused on the tasks ahead. "We must ensure everything is in order," he said firmly to Prince William, who followed closely. The estates cannot be neglected, even for a single day. William nodded, his hands folded behind his back, feeling the weight of responsibility settle like a cloak around him. Of course, Father, everything must be perfect, he replied, trying to match his father's steady tone. Camilla was away as usual on her annual holiday. She had flown to her private villa the week before, her absence unnoticed except by the staff. She would never expect us to check her place while she is away, William muttered, curiosity flickering in his eyes. Charles gave no answer, only a slow nod. Sometimes routine work reveals surprises, he said, voice low, almost a warning. The two men left the palace quietly, their cars gliding through the misty streets, carrying them toward the estate Camilla had so carefully hidden from public view. When they arrived, the villa appeared unchanged from the outside, perfect hedges, freshly painted walls, and polished windows reflecting the morning light. Yet something about it felt different. Charles paused at the gates, his hand resting lightly on the ironwork. "It is too quiet," he murmured. "A house should feel alive, even when empty." William looked around, noting the stillness in the air. "Perhaps it is simply her way," he suggested. "She likes solitude." Charles nodded, but unease crept across his face. Solitude, yes, but this feels other. Inside, the villa was even more striking. Luxurious furniture filled the rooms, each piece carefully chosen, each curtain perfectly arranged. The floors gleamed under their shoes, reflecting the light from grand windows. Yet despite the beauty, an odd silence hung in the air, heavy and almost deliberate. "It smells of roses," William said, wrinkling his nose. "But something else too. Old wood, maybe." Charles's eyes scanned the room, sharp and wary. "Attention to detail is everywhere," he observed. "But I cannot shake the feeling that something is hidden here." As they walked through the villa, Charles and William commented on the minor details, unaware of what awaited them. "The carpets are new," Charles noted, "and the drapes finely tailored. She spares no expense." William nodded. "Even the books on the shelves are arranged by size. She must spend hours organizing them." Their conversation was calm, almost casual, but beneath the surface, tension simmered. Each step revealed perfection, yet it also hinted at secrets, and both men felt it keenly. They passed the dining room, where a long table gleamed under the chandelier's soft light. "She must entertain rarely," Charles said, touching the polished wood. "No signs of recent gatherings." William leaned closer, examining the crystal glasses lined along the sideboard. "Everything is unused. Even the silverware seems untouched." A shiver passed between them, unspoken but shared. The villa's beauty now seemed more like a mask, hiding something unknown. Moving further into the house, they reached the library. Shelves stretched from floor to ceiling, filled with leather-bound volumes. A faint smell of dust and ink lingered. Charles picked up a book, opening it to a random page. "Even her reading is precise," he murmured. William, scanning the room, noticed papers scattered on a desk, some turned face down. "Why hide these?" he asked quietly. The question seemed too loud in the silent room, echoing off the walls, unanswered. Every corner of the villa told a story of meticulous care, yet an unexplainable tension lingered. Windows framed the gardens, bathed in sunlight, but the air was oddly cold, as if the house itself was aware of intruders. "She has secrets here," Charles said softly. "I can feel it." William looked at his father, uncertainty in his eyes. "Do you think she would want them kept from us?" Charles shook his head slowly. "It is not about wanting. It is about necessity. And fear, perhaps." They approached the master bedroom. The doors were heavy, carved with intricate patterns. Charles's hand hesitated on the handle. "What would she be hiding in here?" William asked. The question seemed too direct, almost dangerous, yet neither could stop themselves from entering. The room was immaculate. Sunlight streamed through large windows, casting long shadows across the bed. On the nightstand, a small object lay partially hidden under a silk cloth. Charles bent down, eyes narrowing. "William, look at this." For the first time, the villa no longer seemed just luxurious or quiet. It was a place of mystery, carefully guarded by its absent owner. The air grew heavier, and an unspoken tension filled the room. What they had thought would be a routine inspection had become something else entirely, an encounter with the unknown, a secret that Camilla had kept from everyone, even her family. And in that quiet, sunlit room, both father and son realized that the villa had a story of its own, waiting to be told, and they were standing at the very beginning. But they were far from prepared for what they were about to discover. The shocking discovery. King Charles and Prince William stepped cautiously through the villa's main hall. The air was heavy, almost thick, as if the house itself was waiting for them to uncover its secrets. Charles paused, eyes narrowing at the sight before him. "William, look at this," he whispered, his voice trembling slightly. William followed, scanning the walls. His stomach turned as he took in the first images. Dozens of photographs of Diana were plastered across the room. At first, they seemed harmless, smiling pictures from public events, candid shots from decades ago. But a closer look revealed something far more disturbing. Horns had been drawn on Diana's head in black marker. Some images had cruel words scribbled beneath them: liar, fraud, traitor. Even newspapers were pinned to the walls, the headlines carefully edited. One read, "Diana betrays the crown," with letters cut out and glued over the original words. Charles's hand shook as he touched a photo. Who would do this?" he asked, voice low, almost breaking. William swallowed hard, his own breath coming fast. "It feels personal," he said quietly. "This is not just an obsession, this is hate." Both men moved slowly down the hall, eyes darting from one image to another. The villa, which had seemed quiet and controlled, now felt like a trap. As they entered the main sitting room, the true horror became clear. The images tracked Diana's life in unsettling detail. Birthdays, anniversaries, public appearances, everything was documented. One wall was devoted entirely to her movements in Paris in 1997, the months leading up to her death. A photograph of the crash site, blurred but recognizable, hung in the center. Scrawled beneath it in red ink were the words, "Finally, she is out of the way." William's hand flew to his mouth, stifling a gasp. "Father, this cannot be real," he whispered. 0:57 to 1:05. Charles turned slowly, his face pale. "It is real, William, and it is worse than I ever imagined." He gestured to the walls, every inch covered with evidence of what seemed like years of preparation. This is more than an obsession. It is dangerous. It is personal." William's eyes widened as he noticed a map with pins marking Diana's travels across Europe, lines connecting each location to photographs and notes. The villa was no longer just a holiday home. It was a shrine built around anger and revenge. The father and son moved deeper into the house. In the study, they found letters pinned to a corkboard. They were not addressed to anyone, but the words inside were cruel and obsessive. "You cannot hide forever, Diana," one read. "The world will know your lies." Another stated, "Your smiles are fake. Everyone can see through you." The handwriting was meticulous, neat, and chillingly consistent. Charles shook his head. "This is unimaginable," he said. "All these years we thought she was simply at peace." William swallowed hard. "Peace?" he echoed. "No one could call this peace. This is madness." They entered the bedroom next, the air colder than anywhere else in the villa. On the walls, photographs of Diana were pinned with more violence than before. Black X's, circles, and arrows connected images of her laughing, crying, and walking alone. Notes in tiny writing detailed the dates, times, and locations of each photograph. Some even described private moments, ones that no one should have witnessed. "It is as if she was being watched every day of her life," William said, voice shaking. Charles placed a hand on his son's shoulder, and it did not stop, even after her death, he murmured, eyes glistening. In the corner of the room, a small table held scrapbooks filled with cutouts from newspapers and magazines. Every story, every rumor about Diana had been collected, annotated, and highlighted. Some notes were written in all caps. "Liar, fraud, manipulator." Charles stared at one page for several moments. This is a vendetta," he said slowly. Not political, not accidental, personal. William's face paled. "Do you think someone planned this?" he asked. "Was there a conspiracy behind it all?" Charles shook his head, though uncertainty lingered. "I do not know, William, but whatever it is dangerous, and it has been brewing for years." The villa's luxury now seemed grotesque against the backdrop of hatred displayed on the walls. Rich carpets, elegant furniture, and bright sunlight did nothing to soften the chilling obsession that surrounded them. The images of Diana were everywhere, yet the message was clear. Admiration had twisted into something dark and obsessive. She watched, she plotted, she remembered every detail, Charles said, his voice low. "And now we are seeing it all." William swallowed, feeling a wave of nausea. All these years, the world never knew. How could no one have seen this? They moved to the final room in the villa, a small private office. On the walls were calendars, each day marked with photographs or notes about Diana. The careful documentation stretched from 1979 to 1997. Even small trips, like visits to friends or vacations abroad, were noted with commentary and sharp handwriting. Charles touched a photo of Diana smiling at a charity event. "She was monitored even in life," he said quietly. "Every step, every move, every smile. And now, we are standing in the proof." William sank into a chair, feeling overwhelmed. "Father, what does this mean? Why would someone—" His voice broke. Charles put a hand on his son's arm. "I do not know yet, but this is not just about her. It is about obsession, hatred, and perhaps revenge. We must understand it carefully without rushing to judgment. But one thing is clear, someone inside this villa has carried a vendetta that is beyond reason." The two men stood in silence for a long moment. The villa, once a symbol of Camilla's privacy, had revealed itself as a house of shadows. Every wall, every photograph, every note shouted a story of anger, cruelty, and obsession. Charles finally spoke, voice firm despite the tremor underneath. "William, we must take this seriously. This cannot be ignored. The world does not know, and perhaps it should never know the full truth, but we cannot pretend we did not see it." William nodded slowly, feeling a mix of fear, confusion, and disbelief. "It is worse than I imagined," he said. "And yet, we must find answers. We cannot leave it like this." Charles turned toward the door, eyes scanning the walls one last time. "Whatever this means, William, we are now part of it, and we must decide how to move forward, carefully and wisely." The villa, which had seemed a place of rest, was now a monument to something far darker, a mystery that demanded confrontation. Emergency palace meeting. The phone on King Charles's desk rang sharply, breaking the silence of the early morning. He stared at it for a long moment before answering, his voice low but urgent. "Yes. Assemble them immediately. Every senior advisor and security chief. This cannot wait." By the time the first carriages rolled into the palace courtyard, the room was already thick with tension. Heavy drapes hung over tall windows, muffling the sounds of the city outside. Advisors arrived in pairs, whispering guesses and theories as they entered, their faces pale with concern. Charles stood near the fireplace, his hands clasped tightly, eyes darting from one face to another. "We have a situation," he began, his voice steady but carrying a weight that froze the room. "One that demands our immediate attention and our utmost discretion." Sir Henry, a longtime advisor, leaned forward, clearing his throat. "Your Majesty, may I ask what exactly we are dealing with?" His tone was careful, almost fearful, as though any wrong question could make the situation worse. Charles looked at him, his eyes heavy with worry. "You will see soon enough," he said quietly. "But I need every decision to be measured, every word precise." The room went silent again. Outside, the palace gardens were bright with sunlight, but inside a shadow seemed to settle over every advisor, every aide. Lady Margaret, one of the oldest members of the Royal Council, spoke next. "If this is about the public, sir, we must consider the fallout. The media, the people, their trust hangs by a thread already." Her hands shook slightly, betraying the calm she tried to show. Charles nodded slowly. "Exactly," he said. "This is not just about family. This is about the monarchy, the crown, the reputation we have worked our entire lives to protect. 0:51 to 1 o'clock. And yet, it is deeply personal. His voice softened for a moment, almost a whisper. We face a choice: protect the family or confront a truth that could destroy us from within. Speculation began to fill the room like smoke. Advisors spoke over one another, each suggestion more alarming than the last. Could it be a vendetta, one asked? Something personal or worse, a threat to national security? Another added, if the press catches wind, the damage will be immense. The people, they will question everything. Charles raised a hand to silence the chatter. Listen to me, he said firmly. We do not act rashly. We gather facts first. But I need to know, morally, politically, how far does this go? How much is personal obsession, and how much is a danger to the public? A murmur ran through the room. Even the most experienced advisors looked uneasy. Sir Henry spoke again, carefully choosing his words. Your Majesty, the villa, the images. If what we fear is true, this crosses the line between private fixation and public harm. We cannot ignore that. Yet, we must also consider the impact of revealing it too soon. Charles's hands tightened into fists. We cannot wait, he said. The longer Camilla remains unaware, the more unpredictable the situation becomes. We need plans. Security must be increased, public statements, ready in case the story leaks. And his gaze darkened, scanning each advisor's face. We need truth, no matter how painful it might be. Outside, the sun continued its steady climb, casting light across the palace gardens, but inside the room felt smaller, suffocating. Lady Margaret whispered almost to herself, if this is allowed to continue, it will ruin everything, not just the family, the crown itself. Charles turned sharply. Exactly. Which is why we meet now. Which is why we act carefully. Every step we take must be measured, every decision weighed against the consequences for both family and kingdom. One of the younger aides, visibly nervous, raised a trembling hand. Sir, Camilla, she is unaware of this, yes? Charles nodded. She is unaware, he confirmed, completely. And she continues her holiday as if nothing has changed. That is why discretion is essential. We cannot act like tyrants. We must act like guardians, and that is far more difficult. The room fell silent once more. The weight of responsibility pressed down on everyone present. Charles's voice broke the stillness again, calm but resolute. We have two paths before us. One leads to confrontation, one to careful management. Both are dangerous, both carry consequences, and neither is without moral burden. We must decide quickly yet wisely. Sir Henry swallowed hard, his eyes scanning the room as if searching for answers among his peers. Your Majesty, the public, if informed, they will not understand the subtleties. They will see only scandals. We must prepare every measure to protect both dignity and truth. Charles let out a deep breath. We will. That is why you are here. That is why I trust you all. Our choices today may define the monarchy for decades, and we must be certain, above all, that we act with integrity. Outside the palace, the gardens remained bright and serene, completely unaware of the storm brewing inside. Camilla, far away in her villa, laughed lightly as she sipped her morning tea, completely ignorant of the discovery that had shaken her family to its core. She wandered through her holiday garden, humming softly, the sun warming her face. Inside the palace, the emergency meeting stretched on, each minute heavier than the last. Advisors debated, plans were drafted, security measures discussed. Charles remained at the center, calm on the surface but burning with worry beneath. He spoke again, quietly but with strength that filled the room. We are custodians of more than tradition. We are guardians of a legacy, fragile and sacred. Today, we decide not only for ourselves, but for every generation that follows. No one spoke after that. Inside, the palace waited, tense and silent, for the next move in a drama that had already begun, Camilla's return and confrontation. Camilla returned to the villa in the late afternoon, her car winding down the gravel driveway. She stepped out, smiling, carrying a small bag of personal belongings. The sunlight highlighted her calm confidence, as if nothing could disturb her peace. Ah, my favorite place, she murmured to herself, adjusting her scarf. Just what I needed. She had no idea that the house, which she had carefully curated, had been invaded, not by intruders but by those she trusted most. Charles and William waited inside, their faces tense, pale, and serious. The air seemed charged, electric with anger and disbelief. Camilla walked in, her eyes bright and curious. "Father, William," she said, her tone light. "I did not expect anyone here today. Is everything well?" She noticed the stiffness in their posture and the sharp edge in their gazes. "Something is wrong," she said slowly, a shadow of unease crossing her face. Charles stepped forward, his voice firm. "Camilla, we need to speak, now." He gestured toward the walls, still plastered with the disturbing images of Diana. William's voice joined, tight and low. "We have seen everything. Every photograph, every note, every hateful word pinned on these walls." Camilla froze, her confident smile faltering for the first time. What are you saying?" she asked, the question almost a whisper. Charles swallowed, gathering his composure. "Do not pretend you do not know, Camilla. The images of Diana, the annotations, the messages, all of it is here." His hand trembled slightly as he gestured to a wall filled with edited newspaper clippings. Horns drawn on her head, lies written over the truth, even the crash photo, and that note. Finally, she is out of the way. He let the words hang in the air, heavy and accusing. Camilla's face blanched, but she quickly masked her fear with shock. I do not understand," she said, her voice higher now. This cannot be real. You must be mistaken. Perhaps someone has tampered." William's eyes narrowed. "Tampered? Camilla, we were alone here. No one else could have done this. Not staff, not anyone. You were the only one with full access." Her lips pressed together, and for a moment she looked genuinely uncertain. Then slowly she straightened, her posture returning to its usual composure. "I see. You are upset," she said softly, almost coaxing. "I admit, the walls are unusual, yes, but you must understand it was research, for perspective, historical context. I needed to understand her life, her impact, the complications." Charles's jaw tightened. "Research? You tracked her life until her death. You wrote over newspapers. You mocked her image. This is not research, Camilla. This is an obsession, malice." Camilla's eyes flicked toward William. "William, you know me. I would never hurt anyone. Perhaps the presentation is dramatic, yes, but the intention was analytical. You must see that." William shook his head, anger flashing in his eyes. "Analytical? This is grotesque. You humiliated her even after death. You turned tragedy into a shrine of hate." He took a step closer, voice rising. "Do you not understand what you have done, the pain this causes to all of us?" Camilla's face hardened, though her tone tried to remain calm. "Pain?" she echoed. "I sought to understand history, to prepare, to anticipate consequences. Everything I did had a purpose. You misunderstand me. You always do. Emotions cloud judgment. You see only the horror and not the reasoning." Charles's voice became sharp, each word measured. "Reasoning? You think there is reasoning in cruelty, in obsession, in mocking someone's death?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. "You cannot see the bigger picture. You never do. Perhaps it is easy to judge from the outside. From within, one sees necessity. One sees patterns, truths hidden to others." William's face grew red, his hands clenching at his sides. "Patterns? This is madness. Not the truth, not necessity, just hatred and obsession. Do you not feel ashamed?" Camilla paused, her eyes scanning the walls as if for a moment reconsidering her words. Then, with a soft, almost melodic tone, she said, "Shame is a subjective matter. I acted to secure understanding, clarity, control. You may see it as malice, but I see it as preparation, strategy." Charles's shoulders slumped, his eyes burning with sorrow and disbelief. "Strategy?" he asked, voice breaking. "Strategy that desecrates memory, distorts reality, and leaves the family, us, traumatized? How could you justify this?" For several moments, silence filled the room. Only the soft hum of the villa and the sunlight streaming through the windows broke the tension. Camilla's expression softened, a practiced smile flickering. I did what I thought necessary, she said quietly. You may not understand now, but one day, perhaps you will see the necessity of foresight. You will see that everything had a purpose. William's voice was cold and final. Purpose does not erase cruelty. It does not erase hate. You will answer for this, Camilla. Charles shook his head slowly, pain etched in every line of his face. We trusted you. We believed in your judgment. And now, we are left with this. You cannot undo it. You cannot excuse it. Camilla's eyes remained calm, almost unflinching, though the tension in the room was thick enough to choke. I do not seek forgiveness, she said, voice soft but firm. Only understanding. Perhaps one day, time will reveal my perspective. William's fists loosened, but his anger did not fade. Understanding, he said bitterly. There is no understanding for this, only horror, only questions, only disbelief, and you must live with that. Camilla nodded slightly, as if accepting the judgment without emotion. I will. But remember, history often judges differently than those who live within it. Perhaps one day, all will see reason. Public backlash and media frenzy. The first hints of trouble reached Buckingham Palace as the morning newspapers arrived, stacked neatly on the grand mahogany desk. Charles picked up the first edition and froze. The headline screamed in bold letters, Royal Villa Horror, Camilla's secret obsession revealed. He set the paper down slowly, his fingers trembling. How did this leak? He asked quietly, almost to himself. Within hours, television screens across the nation were filled with images from the villa. Journalists spoke with grave faces, showing blurred pictures of the walls plastered with Diana's photos. Horns were drawn on her head, hateful messages scrawled across newspapers, and edited headlines that called Diana a liar. This is beyond scandal, one news anchor said. This is deeply disturbing. The public deserves answers. Social media exploded. Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook were flooded with comments, photos, and hashtags that spread faster than wildfire. Ordinary citizens shared their shock and disbelief. I cannot believe she did this, one user wrote, claiming it is honoring Diana. That is twisted. Another added, the villa shows obsession, not respect. How can the monarchy allow this? Inside the palace, Charles, William, and senior advisors watched the coverage in stunned silence. Charles ran a hand over his face. This is worse than I imagined, he muttered. The world is watching, and the world is judging. Prince William, standing behind him, spoke with quiet anger. Father, they see the truth, or what they believe is truth. How do we even begin to respond to this? Royal experts were called on to comment for every channel. We have never seen behavior like this from a senior member of the royal family, one historian explained during a live broadcast. Camilla's attempt to frame this as homage is not convincing. The public interprets it as personal obsession. The monarchy's image is at serious risk. Public opinion polls began to reflect the outrage. 0-19 to 0-25. By the end of the day, 67% of respondents said Camilla's actions were inappropriate, while nearly 80% believed the royal family should take stronger action. The numbers speak for themselves, Lady Margaret, a longtime advisor, said quietly to Charles. People do not understand nuance. They see betrayal and obsession. That is all that matters to them. The media frenzy did not relent. Tabloid newspapers printed enlarged photographs of the villa's walls, sometimes highlighting the most shocking images. Headlines screamed, "Obsession or madness," and Camilla's dangerous fixation. Television programs ran segments dissecting every detail, speculating endlessly about motives, past grudges, and possible conspiracies. Every evening, talk shows debated whether the monarchy should intervene publicly or manage the crisis quietly. Inside the palace, the advisors discussed options in hushed, urgent tones. We cannot ignore public sentiment, Sir Henry said, his hands clasped tightly. The people are furious. The monarchy's credibility is in jeopardy. Every moment of silence makes it worse. Charles nodded, his jaw tight. We must respond, he said firmly. But we cannot let this descend into spectacle. Every word, every statement, precise and measured. We must protect the crown, yet confront the truth. The palace communications team drafted multiple statements. One was intended for immediate release, clarifying the monarchy's knowledge of the villa and expressing concern. Another, more detailed statement would address Camilla's role and frame it as a deeply personal matter while avoiding full disclosure of the disturbing images. Every line was debated, revised, and debated again. Charles reviewed each word carefully. No exaggeration, no apology that seems false, truth but not harm, he instructed firmly. Even within the royal family, tension was palpable. William paced the room, glancing occasionally at the screens displaying the latest viral posts. "People are angry," he said. "They feel betrayed. They do not care about intentions. They only see actions. How can we show them that this is not representative of the crown?" By evening, every major news outlet had covered the story. Newspapers across the globe carried translations of the images and reports. Opinion columns argued fiercely over Camilla's morality, her motivations, and the potential consequences for the monarchy. In homes, cafes, and offices, conversations echoed the same disbelief and anger. "She is trying to rewrite the past," one pundit said, "but the public will not forgive her obsession." Charles finally rose from his chair, his hands still trembling slightly. "We face a storm unlike any before," he said to his advisors, voice steady but grim. "The world sees this as a scandal. Our duty is to show control, integrity, and truth. How we respond now will define the monarchy for years to come." Camilla's failed attempt at explanation. The cameras rolled, bright lights blinding as Camilla sat in a carefully staged room. Her hands rested delicately on her lap, her face composed. But behind the calm exterior, a storm raged. She cleared her throat and began speaking in a soft, measured voice. "I never intended to cause harm," she said. "Everything you have seen in the villa was meant to honor Diana's memory. I wanted to remember her, to keep her spirit alive." The words, however, did little to ease the anger boiling across the nation. Social media erupted immediately. Within minutes, phrases like "by painting her evil" and "obsessed, not honoring" trended worldwide. Journalists repeated the criticisms, their voices sharp and incredulous. "Madam, you say this was meant to honor Princess Diana," one anchor asked. "But the images, the words, the edited newspapers, how is that honoring?" Camilla's smile faltered for the first time. She shifted slightly as though searching for the right words and spoke again. I understand it may appear disturbing," she admitted, voice slightly quivering, "but intention is everything. My love for the royal family, for history, guided every choice I made. I never wanted anyone to be hurt." The public, however, was not convinced. Opinion polls showed a sharp decline in approval for Camilla. Citizens felt her words were empty, a veil over something far darker. "Honoring Diana?" one commentator scoffed. "By turning her into a target on your walls? That is obsession, not respect." Tweets poured in at a staggering rate. "This is madness disguised as remembrance," wrote one. Another added, "The palace should remove her from public duty immediately." Inside the palace, the mood was grim. Charles watched the broadcast from the council room, his face tight with worry. "This is worse than I feared," he said, his voice low but heavy with tension. William paced beside him, glancing occasionally at the screen showing Camilla's interview. "She is making it worse," he said. "Every word sounds like an excuse. The public sees it as lies." Sir Henry, one of the senior advisors, spoke carefully. "Your Majesty, her attempt to explain will not calm the people. In fact, it may deepen their distrust. The images themselves speak louder than her words." Lady Margaret added, her eyes grim, "The crown is at risk. Every moment she remains in the public eye increases the danger to the family's reputation." Meanwhile, Camilla tried again, leaning slightly forward, her voice pleading. "I acted out of love. My intention was to celebrate Diana, to preserve history." But even as she spoke, the reactions from the reporters and audience were cold. Faces that had moments ago nodded politely now furrowed in disbelief. Cameras captured every twitch, every falter, and editors around the world replayed the moments endlessly. The isolation was clear. No sympathetic voices emerged in the commentary. Experts dissected her words on television and radio. "Intentions do not erase actions," one analyst said. "The obsession, the tracking of Diana's life, it is impossible to justify." The public's ridicule only grew. Memes, jokes, and harsh critiques flooded the internet, painting Camilla not as a grieving figure, but as someone consumed by obsession. Back in the palace, Charles spoke again, more firmly this time. "We cannot allow this to continue unchecked," he said, his eyes meeting William's. "The family must decide our next steps carefully. Her explanations have failed. She is isolated, and the public has turned. We need a plan, one that protects the crown while addressing the crisis." William nodded, tension in his jaw. "It is clear she cannot defend herself," he said. "Every word she utters adds to the damage. The longer this continues, the more the people lose trust, not just in her, but in all of us." As Camilla concluded her interview, her carefully composed mask returned, but it could not hide the growing desperation. Camilla's retreat and uncertain future. Camilla vanished from the public eye almost overnight. The bright lights, the cameras, the endless questions, all of it stopped. Newspapers printed photos of empty chairs where she had once sat, and television anchors noted her absence with cautious tones. Inside her villa, she walked slowly through the rooms, her hands trailing along the furniture, as if searching for reassurance. "I never wanted this," she whispered to no one, her voice barely audible. The monarchy watched closely, but in silence. King Charles convened another meeting with senior advisors, his expression heavy. "Her retreat is necessary," he said, rubbing his temples, "but absence does not erase the damage. The people have seen her actions. The images, the words, they linger." Prince William, standing nearby, nodded. "She cannot speak for herself right now, but the question remains, can she ever return?" 044 to 050. Inside the palace, speculation filled every corridor. Advisors debated endlessly, weighing loyalty against public opinion. Lady Margaret, her voice trembling with concern, said, "The crown must remain strong. Camilla's role cannot overshadow that, but she is family, and we cannot forget the past we share." Sir Henry added, "Every move she makes now will be measured against history. Every word could ignite another scandal. Her influence is gone, but her presence still matters." Outside, the public was relentless. Opinion polls reflected a sharp decline in support for Camilla. Headlines called her the withdrawn figure and the shadow in the palace. Social media carried endless debate. Citizens questioned her intentions, her morality, even her place within the monarchy. "If she cannot regain trust, what is her purpose?" one user asked. Another added, "She has retreated, yes, but the scandal will not leave her alone." Camilla herself remained uncertain. Some mornings she walked through her garden, staring at the horizon, silently asking herself what her future could hold. "Will they ever forgive me?" she murmured to a private aide. "Will I have a place in this family again, or have I lost everything?" Her voice carried a mixture of fear, regret, and defiance, all tangled together. Within the palace, tension persisted. Charles spoke quietly to William one afternoon. "We must consider not only the crown's reputation, but the history between us and Diana. The family's loyalty is tested by more than words. It is tested by the weight of memory, by what the people will accept." William, pacing the room, replied, "Every decision now matters, every appearance, every silence. We cannot misstep, but we also cannot ignore the past. Diana's shadow still touches everything." Even as advisors discussed strategy, no clear path emerged. Camilla's retreat left a void, and the uncertainty surrounding her future hung over the palace like a storm cloud. Would she return to public life? Could she regain trust? Or was she destined to remain a silent, haunted figure, removed from influence but never forgotten? As night fell over the palace and the villa alike, the world waited in suspense. Camilla sat alone, the fading sunlight casting long shadows across the room. The questions remained, heavy and unanswered. What would become of her? Could she survive this storm? And would the monarchy, fragile and tested, endure the weight of her secrets? The silence that filled the rooms was deafening, and for the first time in years, even the walls seemed to hold their breath, waiting for a future that no one could yet see.